I was standing in the grocery store last Tuesday, just a normal Tuesday, and I noticed something that stopped me cold. The shelf where they keep a certain staple I've been buying for 20 years was almost completely empty. Not sold out, almost empty. And the few packages left had a price tag that made me do a double take. I pulled out my phone right there in the aisle and started doing some research. And what I found over the next hour changed how I think about my pantry entirely. Most Americans don't realize how fast the supply picture on basic food staples is shifting right now. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way the news is covering, just quietly, steadily, in ways that are going to matter to your grocery bill and your family's security over the next 6 to 18 months. I put together this list because I think everyone needs to hear it. These are not doomsday supplies. These are not extreme prepper items. These are 10 foods that real families buy every week, foods you probably already use. And I'm going to explain exactly why right now is the smartest time to make sure you have enough of them on hand. Stay with me, because number 7 on this list is the one that genuinely surprised me the most. I've been using that product my whole life, and I had no idea what was happening to it. You're going to want to hear that one. And before we get into the list, if this kind of practical, no-hype consumer information is useful to you, hit subscribe right now. We put out content like this every week, and it's always free. Let's get into it. Item number 1, white rice. Let me start with the most obvious one, because even the obvious ones have something new to say right now. White rice is the single most important pantry staple you can own. It has a shelf life of up to 30 years when stored properly. It's cheap per calorie. It pairs with almost anything. And it's culturally versatile. It works in American cooking, Asian cooking, Latin cooking, Middle Eastern cooking. It's the most universal food on earth. Here's what most people don't know. Global rice prices have been under pressure for the past 2 years. India, which is one of the world's largest rice exporters, put restrictions on certain rice exports starting in 2023, and those restrictions have had ripple effects that are still working through the system. Domestic rice prices in the US have been creeping up, and some regional shortages have created temporary gaps on store shelves in certain parts of the country. I looked at Walmart and Sam's Club pricing over the last several months, and the trend is clear. The price per pound on 20-pound bags has moved noticeably upward compared to 2023 levels. It hasn't been dramatic, but it hasn't reversed either. When I was at Costco last month, I stocked up on their store brand long grain white rice. I got 2 25-pound bags. That's 50 pounds of rice for under $40 depending on your location, roughly 80 cents a pound. That is going to look like an incredible deal 18 months from now if current trends continue. Store it in a sealed 5-gallon food-grade bucket with an oxygen absorber, and it will last for decades, not years. Decades. Put it in a cool, dry, dark place and forget about it. It's not glamorous, but it is one of the smartest financial moves you can make for your household right now. You don't want to be the person paying premium prices for rice because you waited too long. Item number 2, canned beans. Canned beans are having a moment right now, and most people don't even realize it. Black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, navy beans, all of them. The canned bean category has quietly become one of the best value protein sources still available at American grocery stores. At a time when ground beef is regularly exceeding $6 a pound in many markets, a can of black beans gives you roughly 14 grams of protein for around $1, sometimes less. But here's the pressure point. Tin prices and aluminum prices have been volatile. The cost of producing canned goods has risen, and brands have responded the way they always do, sometimes by raising prices outright, and sometimes by quietly shrinking cans from 16 ounces to 15 or even 13.5 ounces while keeping the price the same. I noticed this myself at my local grocery store. I was comparing 2 brands side by side and realized the store brand was actually a full ounce heavier than the name brand at the same price. I'd never looked that closely before. Once I started looking, I started seeing it everywhere. The practical move here is to buy in cases. At Walmart, You can buy a 12-pack of canned black beans or pinto beans at a meaningful discount compared to buying them individually. Amazon also sells cases of store-brand canned beans at competitive prices, and if you have Prime, you can often get them delivered free. Buy what you'll use over a year. Rotate your stock. Canned beans have a shelf life of 2 to 5 years easily, and many people report they're still perfectly fine well beyond that. Beans are one of those foods where a well-stocked pantry pays for itself the first time a week gets financially tight. Item number 3. Rolled oats. This one is deeply personal to me because oats were the first thing I started taking seriously when I began paying attention to pantry stocking. Rolled oats are a complete breakfast, a baking ingredient, and an emergency meal all in one. They're filling. They're nutritious. They're cheap. A 42-ounce container of Quaker old-fashioned oats used to cost around $4. In many markets, that same container is now sitting closer to $5.50 or $6. That's a significant move for a commodity product. The reason is a combination of factors. Oat crop yields have been inconsistent due to weather disruptions in key growing regions in Canada, and the northern US oat demand has increased globally, particularly in markets where plant-based eating is growing. And transportation and processing costs have added pressure throughout the supply chain. When I looked into this, I found that the price trajectory on oats mirrors what happened to other grains a year or two before oats started moving. The pattern is frustratingly consistent. Prices go up slowly, then stay up. They rarely come back down to where they were. Here's what I do. I buy oats in bulk, 25-pound bags from restaurant supply stores or from Costco's business delivery service. I store them in sealed food-grade containers with oxygen absorbers. Rolled oats stored this way will last up to 2 years or more without any quality loss. That's 2 years of breakfasts, 2 years of oatmeal cookies, 2 years of granola, all purchased at today's prices. If you have a family of 4 and you eat oatmeal even twice a week, doing the math on bulk oat purchasing is genuinely eye-opening. This is one of those items where the gap between what you pay now and what you'll pay in 18 months is already visible. Item number 4. Honey. I want to spend a little extra time on honey because the situation with honey right now is something I find genuinely alarming. And I don't use that word lightly. Honey is one of the oldest preserved foods in human history. Properly sealed honey does not expire. Ever. Archaeologists have found honey in Egyptian tombs that was still edible after 3,000 years. From a pantry perspective, that is the ultimate food storage win. But here's what's happening. Bee colony collapse disorder has not gone away. Domestic honey production in the United States has been under sustained pressure for years. At the same time, imported honey, which makes up a large portion of what sits on American grocery store shelves, has faced scrutiny over quality concerns and adulteration. I spoke to someone who runs a small beekeeping operation, and she told me something I hadn't considered. The retail price of genuine domestic raw honey has increased significantly over the last 3 years, but the commercial blended honey sold in most supermarkets has stayed artificially cheap because of how much imported product is being mixed in. Her point was that if you want real honey with genuine shelf stability and health properties, you're already paying more, and that price gap is only going to widen. When I started looking at labels more closely, I was shocked at how little pure domestic honey is actually on the shelf at most major grocery chains. The good news is that farmers markets, local beekeepers, and websites like Amazon still sell genuine raw domestic honey at prices that, while higher than the blended stuff, are still very reasonable when you buy in larger quantities. I now keep a minimum of 10 pounds of raw honey in my pantry. It sits in a cabinet, and I've used it for 2 years without it going anywhere near bad. It's a sweetener, a preservative, a cough suppressant, a wound treatment, and a caloric energy source. There is nothing else in my pantry that does that many things. Buy it now, buy it in bulk, and buy the real thing. Item number 5. Canned fish. Let me make a case for canned fish that goes beyond the obvious. Canned tuna has been a pantry staple for generations, but the category has gotten much more interesting and more valuable in recent years, and I think most people are still sleeping on it. Canned salmon, canned sardines, canned mackerel, and canned anchovies all deserve a place in a serious emergency pantry. Here's why. These are complete proteins with excellent fat profiles. Canned sardines and mackerel are among the highest omega-3 foods you can buy in any form. They're not just survival food, they're genuinely healthy food. And the price per gram of protein puts almost everything else in the grocery store to shame. Here's the trend that matters. Fresh seafood prices have been volatile and generally elevated. Consumers who used to buy fresh fish regularly are starting to feel that at the checkout lane. At the same time, canned fish production has faced its own cost pressures. Brands have been quietly raising prices or shrinking can sizes on tuna, something that consumer data from grocery industry tracking services confirmed last year. I noticed this with a brand I'd been buying for 10 years. The can looked identical. The price was nearly the same, but the net weight had dropped from 6 ounces to 5 ounces. That's a 16% reduction in product for the same money. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. The strategy here is to diversify what you stock. Don't just buy tuna. Buy sardines in olive oil. Buy canned wild Alaskan salmon. Buy smoked mackerel fillets. Costco carries excellent canned salmon in multi-packs that represent some of the best value in the entire store. Stock up to a 6-month supply. These products have shelf lives of 3 to 5 years. They will not go to waste. This is about protecting both your budget and your family's nutrition when things get tight. Item number 6. Pasta and pasta sauce. Here is where I get slightly controversial, because I know pasta feels too ordinary to discuss seriously. Bear with me. Pasta is a miracle food from a storage and value perspective. A 1-pound box of dry spaghetti has roughly 1,600 calories, stores for 2 or more years, costs between $1 and $2, and can become a complete meal with nothing but a jar of sauce and maybe a can of beans. There is almost no other food that delivers that kind of value at that price point. What's changing right now is the sauce side of the equation. The tomato industry has been dealing with crop challenges for the past 2 growing seasons. California, which produces roughly a third of the world's processed tomatoes, has had weather and water availability issues that have pressured production. Tomato paste prices, which underpin virtually all pasta sauce products, have been moving upward through the supply chain. I've been watching the shelf price on my usual brand of pasta sauce, and it has moved up about 30% over the past 2 years. That's not a small shift. That's a real, sustained change in what this basic weekly staple costs. Here's the smart move. When your grocery store puts pasta sauce on sale, and they all do regularly because it's a high-volume category, that's your signal to buy a case, not just 2 jars. A case of 12 24-ounce jars of pasta sauce bought on sale will last your family months and will almost certainly have been cheaper than buying them individually at full price over that same period. Do the same with dry pasta. Buy it when it's on promotion. Stock 30 to 60 pounds if you have the storage space. It weighs nothing, takes up minimal space, and the worst case scenario is that you eat a lot of pasta this year, which, honestly, most Americans already do. Item number 7. Peanut butter. This is the one I promised you, and I want to be clear. I've eaten peanut butter my entire life. I grew up on it. My kids grew up on it. And I had no idea what was quietly happening to this product until I really started paying attention. Here's the thing about peanut butter. It seems cheap, it seems stable, it seems like it's always going to be there at roughly the same price. That assumption is now being tested in a way that most shoppers haven't caught on to yet. Peanut farming in the United States is concentrated in a relatively small number of states: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Florida, and a few others. When those regions have a bad growing year, it moves through the entire peanut butter market within about 12 months, because that's roughly how long it takes for crop disruptions to work their way through processing and into retail prices. The past two peanut harvest seasons have not been great. There have been drought conditions in parts of the southeast that have affected yield, and globally, peanut oil demand has been rising, which creates competition for the same crop between food oil uses and peanut butter production. This is not a theory. This is what the agricultural commodity data shows. I looked at the price history on a standard 40-ounce jar of Jif peanut butter at major retailers. That jar was around $5 in 2021. It is now regularly sitting at $7 to $8 at most Walmarts and grocery chains I've checked. That's a 40 to 60% price increase over roughly 4 years. And analysts I've read suggest there's more movement likely in the next 12 to 18 months based on current crop projections. Here is what I do. I buy the 2-pack or 4-pack of peanut butter at Costco whenever I go. Costco's peanut butter prices are consistently below what you'll pay at a regular grocery store. Peanut butter has a shelf life of 1 to 2 years unopened, and longer if you buy the natural variety and keep it refrigerated after opening. Stock 3 to 6 months worth minimum. It's protein, it's fat, it's calories. It's one of the best emergency foods you can own. Do not wait on this one. The price increase is not coming. It's already here, and it's still moving. Item number 8. Dried lentils. Lentils are the most underestimated food on this entire list, and I say that as someone who ignored them completely for the first 40 years of my life. Here is what changed my mind. Lentils are one of the few foods that can function as a complete meal entirely on their own. They're high in protein, around 18 grams per cooked cup. They're high in fiber. They're high in iron. They cook from dry in about 25 minutes with no soaking required, unlike most other dried beans. And in dry form, they last 5 or more years stored at room temperature. The price story on lentils is interesting because it goes in a slightly different direction from most staples right now. Lentils are still relatively affordable. A 1-pound bag typically runs between $1.50 and $2.50 depending on where you shop. But that affordability window may not last. Global lentil demand is rising sharply as more people worldwide are incorporating plant-based proteins into their diets, and production is concentrated in Canada and India, making the supply somewhat vulnerable to disruption. I started buying lentils regularly about 18 months ago after a conversation with someone who works in food service supply. They told me that their company had started recommending lentils to restaurant clients as a cost management strategy when protein prices were high. They said the restaurants that built lentils into their menus during tight periods had noticeably more stable food costs than those that didn't. That's insider information, and it applies just as much to your home pantry as it does to a commercial kitchen. Buy red lentils, green lentils, and French lentils. Each one cooks differently and works in different recipes. Keep 10 to 20 pounds in sealed containers. They cost almost nothing to store and will give you a genuinely nutritious, filling meal option for years without any investment in special storage equipment. Item number 9. Shelf-stable milk and dairy alternatives. This one surprises people because they don't think of milk as a pantry item. It's something you buy fresh, use up, and replace. But that way of thinking is exactly why most people don't have any dairy nutrition on hand when they need it. Shelf-stable, ultra-pasteurized milk, often sold in Tetra Pak cartons, can sit at room temperature for 6 to 9 months unopened. It tastes nearly identical to fresh milk. And the price, while slightly higher per ounce than fresh gallon jugs, is entirely reasonable when you factor in the storage flexibility it gives you. Here's the trend worth knowing. Fresh dairy prices have been volatile. Whole milk national average prices have moved significantly over the last 3 years, and while they've come off their peak, they haven't returned to pre-2021 levels. More importantly, the supply chain dynamics for fresh dairy, refrigerated transport, cold storage costs, regional processing capacity, mean that price volatility is structural, not temporary. I started keeping a case of shelf-stable whole milk after a week when we had a long power outage, and I realized how much of our daily nutrition depended on having refrigeration working. It was a wake-up call I should have had sooner. You can also look at shelf-stable oat milk and almond milk cartons. which have similar shelf lives and can serve as cooking substitutes in many recipes. Powdered whole milk is another excellent option. It stores even longer and takes up less space. A 5-pound can of powdered whole milk from a Mormon food storage outlet or from Amazon's Pantry section is one of the most space-efficient nutritional investments you can make. Keep at least a 2-month supply of some form of shelf-stable dairy or dairy alternative. It costs almost nothing to store and fills a genuine nutritional gap in most emergency pantry setups. Item number 10. Salt, sugar, and baking basics. I'm grouping these together because they belong together, and because most people dramatically underestimate how critical they are. Salt, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, all-purpose flour, apple cider vinegar. These are the building blocks that turn your other pantry items from ingredients into meals. Without them, rice is just rice. Flour without leavening is just powder. Salt is a preservation tool, a flavor essential, and historically one of the most traded commodities in human civilization. For good reason. Here's what's happening with these basics right now. Flour prices have been elevated since wheat markets got disrupted starting in 2022, and while prices have moderated somewhat, they haven't returned to pre-disruption levels at the retail level. Sugar has had its own supply pressures tied to Brazilian production cycles and domestic processing costs. And even something as simple as baking powder has gotten quietly more expensive as its component ingredients, primarily cream of tartar and baking soda, have faced their own input cost pressures. I personally never paid attention to the price of salt or baking soda before a few years ago. They were so cheap they felt invisible. But I've watched the prices on these items move in ways I wouldn't have predicted. The strategy here is straightforward. Buy the largest size available of every baking basic you use regularly. A 5-pound bag of salt, a 10-pound bag of sugar, a 5-pound bag of flour, or a 25-pound bag if you bake at all. A large container of baking soda, a bottle of apple cider vinegar. These items are all genuinely inexpensive right now in bulk form. They store for years, and they multiply the usefulness of everything else in your pantry. Think of baking basics as the operating system of your pantry. Every other item runs better because of them. You don't want to have rice, beans, oats, and pasta, and then realize you have nothing to season or leaven any of it with. This is about being prepared, not for a disaster, but for the ordinary reality of a world where prices keep moving in one direction. Here's what I want you to see when you look at this list as a whole. Every single item on it is something you already know. None of this is exotic. None of this is extreme. These are not survivalist supplies. These are the foods that human beings have relied on for centuries because they work, they nourish, they store, they stretch, and they give you options when everything else gets complicated. What I want you to take away from this video is not fear, it's clarity. Clarity about the fact that we are living through a period of meaningful, sustained food price inflation. Clarity about the fact that the gap between what something costs today and what it will cost in 18 months is real and measurable. And clarity about the fact that the single most powerful consumer move available to you is to stock up on durable staples at today's prices before that gap widens further. The people who will look back on 2026 and say they made a smart decision are the people who acted on information like this, while others were still assuming prices would come back down. You now have the list. You have the reasoning behind each item. You know where to buy, how much to buy, and how to store it. The only remaining variable is whether you act on it. Most people won't. Most people will keep buying week to week, hoping the trend reverses, telling themselves they'll stock up when prices are better. Prices are not going to be better. This is the moment. Start with the 2 or 3 items on this list that you use most often. Add them to your next shopping trip in larger quantities than usual. Build from there. It doesn't have to happen all at once. It just has to start. If this video gave you something useful, I hope you'll subscribe so you get the next one. We look at consumer trends, retail data, and pricing patterns every week, and we bring it to you in a way that's practical and actionable. No hype, no panic, just information that helps you protect your household budget. Leave me a comment below. I want to know which item on this list surprised you the most. And if you have something you're already stocking up on that I didn't cover, I genuinely want to hear it. Some of my best content ideas have come from this community. Take care of yourself and your family. The information is out there. You just have to know where to look. I'll see you in the next one.